All right, Rodney, let's shift gears to the one prepared topic that I had, which is a story you wrote in informedamerican.com. Now, there's a font typeface that will police your words, replacing incorrect terms. Oh, man. It says, imagine typing an email, letter, text, or even a comment on social media, and as you enter your words, the device changes what you've written, much like an autocorrect. Thank you for that dystopian image, Rodney. And only this time, it's not replacing misspelled words or a garble of letters, which with what you thinks it intended. Excuse my bad reading. Instead, the device knows exactly what you meant and replaces it with something that is politically correct. It's already here, and it's a system called Polite Type. We've got a link here. You could just go ahead and check out this story if you want to do this. Now, I don't want to say what words I typed into here, but I did play around with some not so nice words, and they did come back polite. Although this, I think, is just the beginning of where this might be going, Rodney. And you ended saying, well, the program might be clunky today, and it is. This appears to be the next evolution of the nanny state. Let's talk a little bit about this.
It as what you read, it's really kind of depressing that somebody would put this out there, because I don't need. Who needs, right? Somebody else policing their language like that. If I'm in a community, even on Informed American, right, we get comments back that I moderate, and there are comments that I send, right to the delete file.
Yeah.
And it's because they've used words or terms or, implied things that I don't want to have up on there. And so the point is, every system that is set up by a private citizen, private business, or whatever, is going to have somebody like me. They're going to have a moderator, or they're going to have a moderator group. Figure out what you want ahead of time. But to say that you're going to mold people's words into something different so that it's politically correct, please just kick them back and say, you know what, start over. Just write it over. Because we're putting way too much effort into trying to mold people into something else instead of expending a little bit of effort saying, we're not going to do this. Go try again.
It does seem to be that way, where it's basically trying to rewire our brains to use what's we just call acceptable speech. But it does. This does move into a larger topic that I know many readers of Informed American feel strongly about, which is censorship. And it does. This does give me that feeling in my gut, which is, I'm saying the 2 + 2 = 4, and yet my phone comes back 5. Every time I put 4, it says 5. That's what this feels like. Language, policing of language is powerful. And if we lose the ability to think in certain ways, then we lose the ability to, or rather to write in certain ways, we lose the ability to think in certain ways. What do you make of, censorship is a big deal, but we've seen some moves here, by the Senate to maybe limit some of the protections that tech companies have, and that's really where the fight is, Rodney, with with censorship of certain political views, particularly I would say conservative views. I feel like they're under attack, being censored out of the public discourse by what I would characterize as tech monopolies. What do you think of that?
I think that's a hard one because we do not have a right to express our unfettered views on social media. They are private companies. We do not have a right to have our views represented in the newspaper. We don't have a right to have our views printed in letters to the editor or any of that. The only place we have a right is in our dealings with the federal government. And so the government doesn't limit your speech. You can go stand on the courthouse steps and say anything you want, short of threatening to kill someone that might be, interpreted as intent to harm, right? And so you can say what you want there. But these companies, the problem is like Google, right? It controls 90-something% of all searches. And so when you have a tech company that controls so much, they clearly control the conversation in the medium that we're all now using. Mm-hmm. And in the medium that we're using right this minute, right? People are watching video over the internet. And so this content exists at the pleasure of Google or, whatever platform it's working through. And I know it's Zoom that we're recording it, but still. So those companies are free to moderate this any way they want.
That seems like a lot of power for just a few hands to hold to control the entire discourse of the country. And
absolutely. And so to unwind that or unravel that is very difficult because when you move from hey, you're not allowed to limit any speech and we're going to, force that on you, you end up with something like 4chan. And for those of you who have not visited 4chan, it's supposed to be the anti-version of Facebook where you can say or do anything. And as you might imagine, you immediately get all the drug dealers and the pedophiles and the criminals and everything else, which is not what we're talking about here. And so when you say, well, gee, I don't want that, I only want X. Well, guess what? Now you've just created your own moderated system.
Right.
And so I don't pretend to have the answer to that, but I do recognize that we're going to have to deal with that because half the country feels stifled. There's no question. Half the country believes their views are not represented on social media.
Yeah, and I would say I think we have a difficulty dealing with this because for decades, I think, and maybe even longer, our concept of what censorship means, at least effectively, maybe not definitionally, but effectively, was that it was going to be an oppressive Stalinist type government that would control what you think. And we have a hard time with the idea that that same level of speech oppression would just simply be done on a corporate side. And we don't quite have a language of how to deal with that. Do you agree?
I agree. And I think it's going to come down to something that's legal versus illegal. And so, you're not allowed to express ideas that are illegal, right? I don't, pedophilia is easy because we can all see it and say that this is a horrible thing. We don't want that view expressed. The problem is then, you will have this rush to make certain speech deemed illegal because it's considered code. And this is not idle. This is what's going on right now, where things you say, things you wear, different things you might, do are supposedly signals of some, inner hate or issue. And so we're being told there are many things we cannot do or say or places we go because it implies we have this inner issue. And so this is a real issue. I don't know how to solve it, but I think it's going to be walking toward that line of if it's legal, you can say any of it and they're not allowed to stop you, which would imply all the name calling and everything else you can do because all that's legal.
Yeah, but I do think I agree, and we're not solving this in these short couple of minutes, but I think we're getting closer to something, and it does seem like movement is there, because if you don't, what good is your First Amendment if you can't effectively exercise it, right?
Well, okay, and so if you want to go there, I mean, and you just introduced the government into this again, and as I said, you have no right to free speech on social media. The alternative would be a government-run social media platform. Now think about that for a minute.
Well, I don't want to think about that.
Well, that is where you would have your right to free speech.
It'd be run like the post office.
Your right to free assembly with anybody you want. Your right to, peaceable protest.
Uh-huh.
All those things that you might want are there. But it's run by Uncle Sam.
What about the argument that says that big tech only exists because of investment and protections that the government gives them? They aren't truly independent and private. In other words, they didn't build the internet or something like that. Do you give any credence to that?
No, every entity exists at the pleasure of the government because they have the right and the ability to tax you out of existence and to regulate you off the face of the planet. And so, if you say that's true for them, why isn't it true for the car companies? Why isn't it true for the energy companies that get subsidies from the federal government? The car companies, the chicken tax, which puts a 25% surtax on trucks from other countries, is the only reason that we have pickup trucks that cost $60,000 stupid dollars, right? Yeah. Because they're protected from competition. And so that applies to lots of things.
Well, that is interesting. I mean, what if you can't? Okay, so maybe I think a good example I've thought of, and maybe you'll tell me it sucks, but
I'll give you my opinion, Dave. Go ahead.
Let's move to the Second Amendment. Guns. Okay, let's just say we have the Second Amendment in the Constitution, but for whatever reason, and I don't think this is completely unimaginable, the political climate is as such that no one will sell you a gun. Do you still have a Second Amendment? You can maybe own one, but the restrictions and some of the policies that these corporations have, or they just decide I'm not, we'll say we saw this with Walmart. Let's just say it just becomes to the point where no one will sell you a gun. Do you still have a Second Amendment?
Yes, you do. because the theory still exists, right? You still have that right to a weapon. If some regulation was put into place that curbed people from wanting to sell you a gun, if they felt regulated out of the business, like, I don't know, a 7,000% tax on weapons or ammunition that couldn't be passed along to the consumer, and therefore it drove you out of the business of selling weapons, that would clearly be a line all the way back to the Second Amendment, and you could say that they were barring you from that. And so I think it's pretty easy to say it would be difficult to craft something that drove people out of that business that couldn't be challenged all the way up at the Supreme Court, and hopefully you will.
Well, it doesn't even have to be regulation. There's no regulation here that makes Google ban certain thought. The political climate could be as such that anyone who opens up a gun store is harassed by, say, Antifa, and they have to close their doors.
That's
or
right.
we just decide that the social pressure from wherever. This is not unimaginable. You see.
No.
We see this is now. So
what is unimaginable is that it would last long enough, because what we're assuming away is that the free market doesn't work. What you're assuming is there's a desire for the weapons that still exists, and there's no one to sell them. And it's like, well, wait a second. The way our system works is you're free to operate any business that's legal. And so you say, well, all these people are going to show up and protest.
Yeah.
Great. I'll do it online. I'll find a way around it. I will hire a bunch of armed guards and present myself as the one person taking a true stand against the Second Amendment. And believe me, if we got down to one gun store in the United States of America, I'd have an awful lot of business at my one gun store. And so the point is, as long as there's the demand, the market will follow.
Well, I don't know about that, Rodney, because there's a giant demand for free speech in this country. There's arguably not half the country, but close to half of the country feels like their voice isn't being heard. But yet the free market somehow doesn't do anything about that. Where's the solution there?
Well, and to your point, it's still not a government thing. And so the government is not out there telling you can't do this. They don't have a hand in this one. This is several companies that have very recently, remember Facebook, I think went public in 2007.
Right.
Google wasn't started until the late 90s. We're still in the wild west of all this. We may think it's been going on forever, but we're only talking 20 stupid years. And so we are very new into figuring this part out and how we're going to work within it. And my expectation is that you will see some sort of technology that allows this to break open, to where Google does lose their monopoly that they have on this sort of thing. Facebook does lose its monopoly. People have been, moving to Instagram and Pinterest and all sorts of other things. And so I think we will come to this through a free market solution.
Yeah, well, I certainly hope so too. But I've tried DuckDuckGo. I've tried some of this stuff, and to be honest, it kind of sucks.
Well, there's a reason that Google has a monopoly, right? Because it works.
Yeah. Well, the change can't come fast enough, and I would like to see something being done. And my final word on this: maybe the government, if it can't affect your rights negatively, maybe the government could positively be essentially an advocate or a protector of some of these rights. I would like to see something like that. Any final comments on this topic, Rodney?
Yeah, I don't think we're close to an answer. I think it will be taken care of, but I don't see it on the horizon right now.
Yeah.
Because we're moving the other direction. We're moving to where we are, as I said earlier, we're willing to see code and speech and dress and things that just makes no sense to me. And instead of taking somebody at their word and moving on, right? I see your action. I hear your word. That's it. For me to know your heart doesn't work. And so I hope that we change that soon enough, and I think the rest will follow.
I agree 100%. And I think these are important conversations that people who call themselves independents or, I guess, I don't know, free thinking is the idea. But essentially, if you're not out there being a Stalinist and trying to silence everybody or try to change their words or creating some sort of, weird language correction device, as we talked about here at informedamerican.com, I think these are very important topics, and I certainly, free speech, being able to express yourself freely, is one of the most fundamental human rights.